Hi folks, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the plot. Another glorious spring Sunday. Just last week I was bragging and boasting about how it was mid-April, which meant there was no risk of frost and I could pretty much start planting everything. I had to say it, didn't I? I tempted fate, and what have we had? 2 weeks of frost. We've just had one and now we've got another on the way. The good news is it's not the end of the world. Everything is just about surviving in my unheated greenhouse. And I've brought you up with me today because there's a few jobs that I want to get done. There's the broccoli bed, which needs a bit of work. I'm going to try re-sowing a few things in the bed, and there were some really useful tips and tricks kind of in the comments of my last video. So thank you very much for that. I also saw a great post from Charles Dowding on Instagram. He's also having a really bad start to his year. So if he's struggling, I don't feel so bad about it myself. And the third job is potatoes. I'm going to put some of the main crop potatoes in this year. I'm going to put some of the main crop potatoes in. Why can't I say potatoes normally on camera? Potatoes. So the broccoli and the brassica bed. In last week's quick tour, I mentioned that although this was getting leggy, it was still quite nice. Unfortunately, when we came to cook some up the other day, we had a nasty surprise because now that it's going to flower and it's getting on a bit, it has turned really, really bitter. So it's time for this to come out. We've definitely had our fill of broccoli. I've tried freezing some, there's a lot, and we've eaten so much. So there's a part of me that's kind of relieved because I hate this netting. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to do the same thing this year with the brassica bed, unless I can come up with some kind of new design or new structure. I think it's mainly the kind of inconvenience of having to take all the wood off and roll it up and slide it up, and it makes harvesting this stuff really difficult, as well as checking for pests earlier in the year and all that kind of stuff. Now, if anyone has any suggestions for different kind of methods to keep the butterflies and the pigeons off your brassicas, I am all ears, because like I say, this stuff just, there's something about it that doesn't sit quite right with me. It's a real pain trying to get in here to weed especially, and as well, the weeds are always threatening to grow up through the netting. It's very easy to rip this stuff and not that cheap to replace it. So any suggestions, I'm all ears. And what I'm gonna have to do now is go around each of these and try to untangle these ties first. One very annoying thing is that I've used the ties, these little green plastic coated ties that I found in the shed in my quest to kind of keep the allotment cheap, and this stuff is falling apart and just gets caught in all of the netting itself. It's very difficult to work with. I hate this netting. Oh God. Each one of these can take a very long time. 3 down. Oh my God. Oh. And that's the last one. The net is free, and now I have the simple task of getting this off and folded relatively neatly, which will be very fun to do on camera. See down here? It's all grown in with the grass and the weeds. I have absolutely no idea what the best way to do this is. I'm all caught in it. Oh God, what's happening? Oh, it's not pretty. I want to get it so it's relatively neat and not a complete and tangled mess when I come to get it out. I think that is about right. Just like that, the perfect way to roll and store your netting. And if you're wondering where this lives, this is the corner of shame. Perfect. Oh my God. In terms of effectiveness, although it was very awkward, this stuff was brilliant. It did work really well. Let me get in close and show you these weeds. Bits of it aren't too bad. This side is probably where it's the worst. So it's time to get these out. You can see I'm armed with hoe and rake. Excited to finally get in and get all these weeds. You can see in here as well, these are starting to flower properly, which is why they're not tasting so nice. Normally, it can be a little bit of a sad time when you've got to cut plants down like this, especially when they're still looking pretty alive and full of vigor. But one of the best things about making your own compost is knowing that this is all just going to fuel your future growth. It's so great being able to make your own compost. So let's get stuck in. And then there's a bit of work because these stems and stuff are so chunky. You're going to have to get to work smashing it all up a bit for the compost. Now, this might sound completely silly, but I can't believe how much green material there is here. There's something about seeing it all densely piled into this that is just really surprising. So loads and loads of fuel for the compost, but I'm gonna have to spend quite a while now going through this, chopping it up into small pieces, which I'm gonna put in here, and then sort out the stalks. The heavy duty stems like this, I'll put in their own pile and give them a good whack with a hammer, which is always a fun and therapeutic task because I don't want all of this going in the compost and taking absolutely ages to break down. It's going to take me a while, so I'll speak to you in just a second. So it's about 25 minutes later. I'm feeling very relaxed. This is quite a nice little job actually. I was kind of dreading it, but just chilling out here in the sun. You can see we've made a pretty good dent, but this is very time consuming. So hopefully it's worthwhile because it means I won't have to spend as long sifting through compost for, you know, big chunky bits of stem or anything like that. So it's a bit of an investment of time. And this is much easier than digging through compost where you're bent over and carrying heavy weights. So yeah, a fellow plot holder did just come along and tell me they admired my patience. The bad news is that I got down here quite late today and we're starting to lose the light. So I'm going to finish this and then I think the other jobs will be for tomorrow or the next day, whenever I can get up here basically. I'm sure we'll be able to fit that in soon. But you can see some of these stems are really chunky. That's a good sound, isn't it? Let's get it in. Now, if you're a regular viewer, you'll know that this compost bay is currently mostly filled with just brown rubbish stuff. Loads of big chunky roots, pretty much all the stuff that didn't break down in this bay. So hopefully all of this really well chopped green stuff will be a really nice way of kickstarting this. I'm going to give it a good mix and I'm going to add all of those pulverized roots. One advantage of having clay soil is that when it dries really hard. It gives you a perfect kind of base for doing this, which is a very messy job. We really just want to break this up so there's way more surface area and this stuff can actually start to break down. Okay, this is also taking quite a long time and I keep telling myself it's not a fool's errand and it is a good investment. But some of these are really chunky. I find it works a lot better. Just a little bit of wood or something. I'm using this just as a kind of, not a chopping block, a hammering block, I guess. It just really helps, but my goodness. Really got to go for it. You see quite often they come apart in half and even that is still too big really, so it needs a bit of a tap as well. Another big one. But I feel like this is quite important because there is so much nutrient and goodness locked up in these plants that I really want them to break down and use it in the future. Maybe use a bit of a harder block of wood if you've got one. And there we have, last one. Nice pile, smashed up brassica root. Just getting these roots in, and then gotta get it all mixed in. And then we're gonna weed the bed. Oh my God, I've made a right old mess down here. Let's get it mixed. Now hopefully, as I try and give this a mix, you'll be able to see just how much brown rubbish there is in here at the moment, basically. Maybe this cardboard can probably come out. As we get lower down, you can see there is some compost starting to form in here. But it would need an awful lot of sifting through. So, hello, I'm going to give this a proper good mix and then see you in a second. Okay, so hopefully you can see the quantity of kind of roots and browns in here. What I'm going to do is just more of this. I'm going to keep adding greens, weeds, grass as I mow it, that kind of thing. And hopefully, with a lot of effort, this will get back to being a decent compost pile. This will all break down, all this stuff. It'll just take a while. So you can see I'm back on the bed now, just giving it a little bit of a rake. You can see that all the main bushes are gone. There's still a couple of stems. There's one here and there's one in here as well. But I think I'm gonna leave those. All those roots and everything will slowly break down over time and they will release those nutrients back into the soil. So I don't think that's too big a deal. This one is gonna stay here for now. These flowers are still delicious, unlike the others. They're so good you can eat them raw. They're so nice. Anyway, I'm going to carry on getting this bed done and hopefully you'll see me in a second and we'll talk about the other stuff there is to do up here this episode. So here we are, day 2. Let's have a little look how I left things. I must say, the compost bin is not smelling too great. There's a strong broccoli odour from there, which isn't surprising, but the bed is looking so much better now. You can see I gave it a pretty thorough weed. It never looks perfect, there's a few bits of green, but I assure you they only belong to dead plants, mostly. So today's job, we've got to get the potatoes in. So the potatoes are going in here, the main crop, and then this bed is where we've had the troublesome carrots and beetroot and radishes are sown in here as well. So I think I'm going to give up all hope for these carrots. Going to give them another go. There are a few. I can see a few seedlings. There are 1 or 2 little seedlings, but it's not really workable. So I think it's time to basically try this again. Now, when it came to these carrots and the lack of germination, there were lots of theories in the comments of my last video. Possibly too cold, possibly too dry, and a lot of other people just saying they've always struggled with the same thing. And I should have said that I have been watering these. I've tried to keep them moist, but they probably have dried out a fair bit. What I'm going to do, rake this over, try and get it back to a fine tilth again, and then we'll do another sowing. And I think what I'm going to do, take the advice that loads of people gave me and put on some boards. This should help keep the moisture in, and because I'm coming up every day to close and open the greenhouse twice a day, I can check them very regularly. And hopefully that'll do the trick. And interestingly, you can hopefully see that this soil actually does look really nice once you've given it a rake. Lovely texture. It's very different from the kind of hard surface that forms on the top when it's dry. You don't have to go far, and then you realise that it's actually quite nice underneath. So just like that, our carrot board experiment is underway. We've got the same 4 varieties that I did last time, well the same 3 plus the 4th here, which is the Purple Sun, the dark purple carrot, which looks really, really cool. We've got the Purple Sun, the Flyaway, the Paris Market Atlas, and then the Early Nantes. I'll be really pleased if these do come up. I'm intrigued to see what the board does. As I was doing it as well, I did come up with a couple more theories. It's around midday and you can see this is already starting to be shaded by the massive bay tree. So I wouldn't be surprised if it takes this bed a bit longer to warm up than the rest of the beds because it doesn't get full sun. And additionally, there was something else I've completely forgotten. Well, I thought of one extra reason anyway. Should we do the potatoes? Potatoes. Should we do the potatoes? Am I saying potatoes weird? Does it sound weird to you? Is it just me? Because I've said it so many times? Potatoes? Potatoes? I don't know. Let's do the potatoes. 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 Potatoes? So this year's potato bed. Potato. The spud bed. You might be able to tell that there's a few things in here already that probably shouldn't really be in here. We've got this fennel, which is kind of like a perennial fennel. It doesn't grow bulbs, but it does put out lovely seeds. And I used a few of those in cooking last year. But the main reason I've kept them, one, they were volunteer, so they've been no work at all. And they stayed over winter, they're winter hardy. But they're just amazing for pollinators. They were absolutely buzzing and alive with hoverflies and that kind of thing. And they're kind of just cool. So I think I'll leave these in. I might take this one out because it's right where I want to put the potato trench. So I might take that one out. And just over there in the back, I'm not sure if you could see that, there's a feverfew plant. And that too was amazing. Absolutely covered in pollinators. Lovely, beautiful little white flowers. In terms of the potatoes and the planting method, I'm going super traditional. The current trend and the best way to grow potatoes, if you like, is definitely in containers or pots. People buy these gigantic black containers and they're not cheap. They're not cheap to fill with compost and they're not cheap to buy in the first place. So you can get amazing crops of potatoes, but I don't have that kind of money, to be honest, to be spending on potatoes. So I've got a couple of quid bag of King Edwards. I'm just going to dig a trench, stick them in the ground. Bit of blood, fish and bone. Job done. And I'm sure you all know how to plant potatoes. I'm just gonna put them in nice and deep. These are main crops, so they do need earthing up. And chitted kind of sprout up first. I'm gonna go a little bit deeper than it looks. Where I've loosened all this, I can just kind of dig down with my hand and pop it in. And then just before I earth these up, I'm gonna give these a really good soak because, as you know, it's been a freakishly dry April. We've had basically no rain and this is pretty dry. So there we go, main crop in. There's not too much to say about this. I love the tricky stuff. I love growing my chili peppers, and the carrots are quite interesting and difficult too. But there's something beautiful about the simplicity of potatoes. You do just stick them in the ground, and for such a relatively low effort, you get such a high reward, such a nice, abundant crop. You know, potatoes really do crop massively. So I do love growing them, even if I don't have any pots to do it in. You might notice as well, there's a few little conspicuous piles of compost on this side. And that's where, in raking that material up for the main crop, I uncovered a few shoots of the first earlies. And although they're okay with a bit of frost damage, I just thought it would be prudent to cover them up because I know we've got frost the next 2 nights. Anyway, we've got absolutely loads done today. I'm sure this episode is already way too long. So thank you ever so much for joining me. Hopefully, I'll see you again next time.